Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The file arrived on my desk one Tuesday morning in March, 16 years after the date it should have been closed forever. By that time, I had been working for the FBI for 11 years, spending most of that time at the Anchorage field office dealing with routine fraud cases and occasional missing person reports that resulted in bodies being pulled from the Nick River or drunk tourists sleeping in someone's cabin. Incidents in Alaska were not the same as those my colleagues dealt with in the 48 states. Here, people didn't get lost in crowds, but in the vast wilderness. The wild swallowed them whole, and sometimes we couldn't even find a boat. The file was thin, perhaps 40 pages of faded reports and yellowed photographs. Someone had stuck a yellow sticky note on the front page. Reopen upon request. Evidence found. There was no signature, no explanation of what evidence had been found or who had requested it. I opened the file. The photograph stapled to the first page showed a man in his early 40s, thin-faced with wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of smile that suggested he spent more time with rocks than people. Dr. Marcus Halverson had been a geologist from the University of Washington, contracted by a mining survey company to assess mineral deposits in the remote interior. He'd gone into Grafton Ridge in early October with 3 weeks of supplies, a satellite phone, and a detailed itinerary. He was supposed to check in every 72 hours. After the first missed check-in, the company waited. After the second, they notified local rangers. By the third week, when a bush pilot finally managed to land near his camp during a break in the weather, Halverson was gone. The original investigation had been handled by Alaska state troopers with minimal bureau involvement. The file contained their reports: camp found intact, tent sealed, sleeping bags still rolled out, food supplies barely touched. His equipment was organized, his notes were current. The last entry in his field journal was dated October 11th at 2100 hours, 9 p.m. It read, "Samples collected, weather turning, should be clear by morning." There was no morning for Marcus Halverson. No body was ever recovered. No tracks led away from the camp except his own boot prints circling the immediate area, which the troopers noted seemed to stop and start in strange patterns, as if he'd been pacing, searching for something. The prevailing theory was that he'd wandered off in the night, perhaps disoriented by hypothermia or a head injury, and succumbed to the elements somewhere in the endless spruce forest that surrounded Grafton Ridge. Case closed. File stamped. Presumed dead. Until now. I read through the reports again, looking for the detail that would explain why someone wanted this reopened. The evidence log was sparse. Personal effects returned to family, camp gear donated, field samples turned over to the survey company. At the bottom of the list, someone had scribbled in pen, "Camera, storage." That was new? I checked the timestamp on the yellow note. It had been placed there 2 days ago, which meant someone in the building had pulled this from deep storage recently. I picked up my phone and dialed down to evidence. "Ramirez. It's Agent Wyatt. I need to know about a piece of evidence from a 1998 case." "Jesus, Wyatt, how far back we going?" "Case number AK 1998-4471. There should be a camera." I heard typing, then a long pause. "Yeah, we got it. Logged in last week. Some state trooper from Fairbanks sent it over with a note saying it was found during a property clear-out. Belonged to Halverson's mother, apparently. She died last month, and when they were cleaning her house, they found a box of his stuff in the attic. Camera was in there. Has anyone looked at it? Not my department. You want it brought up? Yeah, my office. Today if you can. An hour later, Ramirez appeared with a plastic evidence bag containing a Canon AE-1, the kind of film camera that outdoor researchers used before digital took over. The body was scuffed and the lens had a crack, but otherwise it looked functional. There was still film inside. Kodak 400, half exposed. "You're going to develop this?" Ramirez asked. "That's the idea. Might be nothing. Could have sat in that attic for 16 years, probably degraded. Or it might tell us what happened to Halverson." He shrugged and left. I sat there for a long time, turning the camera over in my hands. It felt heavier than it should have, as if those undeveloped frames carried weight beyond their chemical composition. I thought about Marcus Halverson pacing around his camp in the dark, taking pictures of something he thought was important enough to document. What had he seen? By late afternoon, I'd sent the film to our lab in Quantico with a rush order. Then I started making calls. The first was to the mining survey company which had dissolved in 2003 following bankruptcy. The second was to the University of Washington, where a helpful administrator informed me that Halverson's research notes had been archived but were available for review. The third call was to Alaska State Troopers. Grafton Ridge. The dispatcher sounded uncertain. "You mean near the old mining settlement?" "That's the one. Nobody goes out there anymore. Road washed out years ago. You'd need a float plane or a hell of a hike. Anyone still living in the area? Maybe a dozen people, if that. Mostly trappers and folks who don't like company. You planning a trip?" "Possibly." She gave me the contact information for a local ranger station and wished me luck in a tone that suggested I'd need it. I hung up and pulled up satellite imagery of Grafton Ridge on my computer. The settlement wasn't much, just a cluster of buildings along a muddy track that used to be a road. The forest pressed in from all sides, dense and impenetrable, broken only by the occasional clearing or frozen stream. Halverson's camp had been about 4 miles northwest of the settlement, accessible only by foot or ATV. The photos from 1998 showed the camp exactly as the troopers had described. A small orange tent pitched on level ground, a ring of stones for a fire, and equipment stored neatly under a tarp. Everything in order. Everything except the man who'd set it up. I zoomed in on one of the photos. Something about it bothered me, though I couldn't say what. The angle was wrong, maybe, or the shadows fell in a way that didn't quite make sense. I stared at it until my eyes burned, then closed the file. 3 days later, Quantico called. "Agent Wyatt, this is Forensic Tech Delgado. We finished processing that film you sent." "And," a pause, "you're going to want to see these in person. Just tell me what's on them." Another pause, longer this time. I don't know how to describe it. The first dozen frames are standard field documentation, rock samples, geological formations, that sort of thing. But the last 3, she trailed off. What about the last 3? They're dark, almost completely black, but when we enhanced them digitally, we found something. Found what? "I think you should come down here. I'm in Alaska. Just send me the files. Agent Wyatt, I really think, send them." She did. I opened the email on my phone 20 minutes later. The first images were exactly as she'd described. Close-ups of rock faces, wide shots of the surrounding terrain, Halverson's gloved hands holding samples. Professional documentation, nothing unusual. Then came frame 24. The image was grainy, underexposed, shot in near total darkness. At first, I thought it was blank, just an accidental exposure. But when I zoomed in, I saw it. A shape in the distance, pale and indistinct, standing among the trees. It might have been a person. It might have been something else. The resolution was too poor to tell. Frame 25 showed the same scene, but closer. The shape had moved, or Halverson had moved toward it. Either way, the distance between the camera and whatever was in the trees had halved. I could make out vertical lines that might have been a human form, but the proportions seemed off. Too tall. Too thin. Frame 26 made my stomach tighten. The shape filled most of the frame now, close enough that I could see details. Something that might have been a face, though it was tilted at an unnatural angle. The background was nothing but black trees and darker shadows, but in the foreground, illuminated by what must have been Halverson's flashlight, was a hand. Not his hand. This hand was pressed against the camera lens, fingers splayed as if trying to block the shot or reach through the glass. The skin looked wrong, too pale, almost luminous in the flash. And the fingers were too long, the joints bending in places that didn't match human anatomy. I stared at the image until my phone screen dimmed, then I forced myself to look away. My hands were shaking. I called Delgado back. "You enhanced these?" "As much as we could without destroying the integrity." "Why?" "The last frame. That hand, you see it?" "Yeah." Her voice was quiet. "We all saw it." "What do you think it is?" "Honestly, I have no idea. Could be a double exposure. Could be damage to the negative. Could be someone wearing gloves with the fingers extended. But what? But the metadata checks out. The frames are sequential. And whatever was in front of that camera, Halverson photographed it less than 12 hours before he disappeared. I thanked her and ended the call. For a long time I sat in my office, the phone in one hand and the case file in the other, trying to reconcile what I'd just seen with 16 years of official conclusions. Marcus Halverson hadn't wandered off. He hadn't gotten disoriented. He'd been taking pictures of something in the dark, something that got close enough to touch his camera, and then he was gone. The next morning, I requested authorization to reopen the investigation. My supervisor, a woman named Karen Ortiz, who'd been with the Bureau longer than I'd been alive, read through my summary and frowned. "You're basing this on 3 degraded photographs?" "I'm basing it on the fact that a missing person's case has new evidence." "Evidence of what? A blurry shape in the woods?" "Evidence that Marcus Halverson was not alone in that camp before he disappeared." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "Wyatt, you know how these things go. Some hiker wanders off, gets hurt, dies of exposure. Happens every year. The family wants closure, so they invent scenarios, Bigfoot, aliens, government conspiracies. But 99% of the time, it's just bad luck and bad weather. Then let me go up there and confirm it. 1 week. If I don't find anything, we close the case for good." Ortiz sighed. "You really want to fly out to the middle of nowhere in March to chase a 16-year-old ghost?" "Yes." She stamped the authorization form. "Fine, but take someone with you. I don't want another missing agent on my hands." 2 days later, I was on a float plane heading northwest from Anchorage with a partner named Cole Briggs, a younger agent who'd transferred from Juneau 6 months earlier. Briggs was competent, quiet, and didn't ask too many questions, which made him perfect for this kind of trip. As we flew over endless miles of snow-covered wilderness, I briefed him on the case. "So, we're looking for a geologist who disappeared 16 years ago?" he asked, shouting over the engine noise. "We're looking for whatever he photographed before he disappeared." "Which was?" I showed him the enhanced images on my tablet. He studied them for a long time, his expression unreadable, then handed it back. "That's not a bear," he said. "No. And it's not a person. Probably not. So, what are we dealing with?" I looked out the window at the landscape below. frozen rivers, skeletal trees, mountains that scraped the belly of low clouds. "I don't know," I said. "But whatever it is, it's still out there." The pilot banked left, descending toward a small lake surrounded by forest. In the distance, barely visible through the haze, I could see the dark smudge of buildings that marked Grafton Ridge. We were going in. The float plane touched down on a lake called Kettle Pond, about 3 miles southeast of Grafton Ridge, sending up plumes of icy water that froze in the air before falling back as sleet. The pilot, a grizzled man named Tom, who claimed to have been flying Alaska routes for 30 years, killed the engine and let us drift toward the shoreline. "I'll be back in 6 days," he said, not looking at us. "Same time, same place. If you're not here, I wait 30 minutes, then I leave." "We'll be here," I said. "They all say that." He finally turned to face us. "You know what happened to the last fellow who came out here, right? The one you're looking for?" "That's why we're here." Tom shook his head. "Whatever you think you're going to find, you won't. This place doesn't give up its dead." He paused. "And sometimes it doesn't let the living leave either." Briggs and I unloaded our gear. 2 large backpacks, a portable tent, cold weather equipment, satellite phone, GPS unit, and enough rations for 8 days if we stretched them. As we waded through the shallows toward dry ground, I heard the plane's engine cough back to life. By the time we'd shouldered our packs, Tom was already lifting off, the floats leaving long wakes in the dark water. Then he was gone, and the silence closed in. Alaska has a particular kind of quiet that people from the lower 48 don't understand. It's not peaceful. It's the absence of everything familiar. No source, no voices, no hum of electricity or distant music. Just wind through trees and the occasional crack of ice adjusting to temperature shifts. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. We started walking. The trail to Grafton Ridge was barely visible, overgrown with willow and alder. The ground soft with decades of decomposing needles. Our boots sank with each step, and within 20 minutes my calves were burning. Briggs moved ahead of me, his breath coming out in white clouds, his hand resting on the service weapon holstered at his side. "How far?" he asked. 3 miles, maybe less if we cut through the valley. "And people actually lived out here?" "Used to. Mining boom in the 20s, went bust by the 50s. Most folks cleared out. The ones who stayed." I gestured at the forest around us. "They're the type who want to be left alone." We walked in silence for another hour, stopping only to check our GPS and take water. The forest grew denser as we descended into a shallow valley, the spruce trees so tall and close together that the afternoon light barely penetrated. Everything was gray and shadow. That's when I saw the first marker. It was nailed to a tree about chest height, a wooden board with faded red paint forming crude letters. "Private property. Keep out." Below it, someone had added in fresher paint, "They watch friendly locals," Briggs muttered. "Note the they, not we," I said. He looked at me. "You think they're talking about us, the Bureau?" "I think they're talking about whatever Halverson photographed." We continued. More markers appeared as we got closer to the settlement, each one more unsettling than the last. Some were official-looking, the kind Forest Service might put up, warning about unstable terrain or dangerous wildlife. But others were handmade, nailed to trees or propped against rocks, with messages scrawled in paint or carved into the wood. "Don't go out after dark if you hear your name. Don't answer, they take the lost ones." "This is some Blair Witch bullshit," Briggs said, his voice tight. I didn't respond. I was too busy studying the markers, trying to determine when they'd been placed. Some were ancient, the wood rotted, the letters barely legible. But others were recent, Months old, maybe weeks. Someone was still maintaining them. Someone was still warning people away, or warning something to stay out. We reached Grafton Ridge just before dusk. The settlement was worse than the satellite photos suggested. Most of the buildings had collapsed under the weight of snow and time, their walls caved in, roofs sagging. Only 3 structures looked even partially intact: a general store with boarded windows, a small cabin with smoke rising from a metal chimney, and what might have once been a church, its steeple leaning at a 40-degree angle. "There's someone home," Briggs said, nodding toward the cabin. We approached slowly, hands visible, making noise so we wouldn't startle whoever was inside. In rural Alaska, showing up unannounced could get you shot, especially if the residents valued their privacy. As we got closer, the cabin door opened and a man stepped out. He was old, maybe 70, with a beard that reached his chest and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He held a rifle across his chest, not aimed at us, but ready. "You're federal," he said. Not a question. I showed him my badge. "FBI, I'm Agent Wyatt. This is Agent Briggs. We're investigating. I know what you're investigating." He lowered the rifle slightly. "Took you long enough to come back. You knew Marcus Halverson?" The old man spat into the snow. Knew of him, never met him. He didn't come through town, just went straight to his camp. Smart man. Why smart? Because Grafton Ridge isn't a place you want to spend time if you can help it. Briggs spoke up. "Then why do you live here?" The old man looked at him like he was stupid. "Because everywhere else is worse." He gestured with the rifle barrel towards the forest. "You boys planning to head up to the geologist's camp?" "That's the idea," I said. "Tonight? Tomorrow morning?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You'll want to stay here then. I got a shed out back, not much, but it's got a roof and a wood stove, better than freezing in a tent. We don't want to impose." "You're not. I'm telling you to stay. Sun goes down in an hour, and you don't want to be out there after dark. Not this close to where he disappeared." Something in his voice made me reconsider. "All right, thank you. Name's Harper. Roy Harper. Been here 43 years. Seen things that would make your hair white, but I'm still breathing, so I must be doing something right." He turned and walked back toward the cabin, then stopped. "One rule. You hear something outside tonight, you ignore it. You hear your name being called, you ignore it. You hear someone asking for help, you especially ignore it. Understood?" "Understood," I said, though I didn't understand at all. The shed was as advertised, small, drafty, but functional. We set up our sleeping bags on the plywood floor and got the wood stove going. Through a gap in the walls, I could see Harper's cabin about 30 feet away, lamplight glowing in the window. Beyond that, the forest was already darkening, the shadows growing longer and denser. Briggs unpacked our supplies while I reviewed the case file on my tablet, comparing the old photos of Halverson's camp with the GPS coordinates. It would be about 4 miles northwest from here, up a gradual incline through dense forest. In good weather, maybe 2 hours of hiking. In this terrain, probably 3 or 4. "You really think we're going to find anything?" Briggs asked. "I think we're going to find out why he took those pictures. And if we don't like the answer?" I didn't respond. We ate MREs in silence as night fell completely. The temperature dropped fast once the sun was gone, and even with the stove going, I could see my breath inside the shed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the walls and making the trees creak. That was the only sound for a long time. Then I heard it. A voice, distant but clear, carried on the wind. "Help me." Briggs heard it too. He sat up straight, his hand moving toward his gun. "Someone's outside." "No," I said quietly. "There isn't." I heard them. Someone needs help. You heard something that sounds like someone needs help. That's not the same thing. He stared at me. What the hell does that mean? Before I could answer, the voice came again, closer this time. Please. I'm hurt. Help me. It was a woman's voice, young, frightened. Every instinct I had screamed to open the door, to go out and find her. But I remembered Harper's warning, and I remembered those markers in the forest. We're not going out there, I said. Someone could be dying. If someone's out there, they're already dead. The voice called out 3 more times, each time closer to the shed, until it sounded like it was right outside the door. Then it stopped. For maybe 10 minutes there was nothing but wind and creaking wood. Then came the footsteps. They circled the shed slowly, crunching through the snow. Not the quick, urgent steps of someone injured and seeking help. These were measured, deliberate, as if whatever was out there was studying the building, looking for a way in. The steps stopped at the door. I heard breathing on the other side, slow and wet, like something with fluid in its lungs. Then, impossibly, I heard my own voice. Briggs, open the door. I'm locked out. I felt the blood drain from my face. Briggs looked at me, then at the door, his face pale in the stove light. That's you, he whispered. That's your voice. Don't touch that door. Agent Wyatt, I'm freezing. Please open the door. My voice, but wrong somehow. The inflection off, like someone doing an impersonation from memory. The door handle rattled, once, twice, then it stopped. The footsteps moved away from the shed, back toward the forest, fading into the distance. I don't know how long Briggs and I sat there in silence, but it felt like hours. Finally, he spoke. What the fuck was that? I don't know. That was your voice. How? I said I don't know. We didn't sleep that night. We sat with our backs against the wall, guns drawn, listening to the wind in the forest and waiting for morning. Around 3 a.m. I heard more footsteps, but these stayed distant, circling the settlement but never coming close. Just before dawn, I heard something else. A long, low sound that might have been wind through trees but sounded more like breathing. Deep, rasping breaths, as if something massive was inhaling and exhaling just beyond the tree line. When the sun finally rose, pale and weak through the overcast, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. Harper was waiting outside his cabin when we emerged, a tin cup of coffee in his hands. He looked us over and nodded. You boys listen good. What was that last night? Briggs asked. That was you staying alive. Harper sipped his coffee. You still planning to head up to the camp? Yes. He set down his cup and walked over to a stack of firewood next to his cabin. Underneath the logs was a small metal lockbox, which he opened with a key from his pocket. Inside was a handheld radio. This is set to channel 12, he said, handing it to me. I'm on the same frequency. You get into trouble up there, you call. I probably can't help you, but at least I'll know what happened. You've been up there? To Halverson's camp? Once, about a month after he disappeared. State troopers asked me to guide them. He paused. I won't go back. Why not? Harper looked at me with those ancient eyes. Because some places remember what happens to them. And that camp remembered what happened to the geologist. It didn't want us there. Made that real clear. How? You'll see. He turned to walk back inside, then stopped. One more thing. If you find his body, don't bring it back. Just mark the location and let someone else retrieve it. You understand? Why? Because whatever's up there, it might be using him, and if you bring him down, you bring it with you. With that, he went inside and shut the door. Briggs and I stood in the cold morning air, watching our breath turn to fog. Finally, he spoke. We could turn back. Tell Ortiz the camp is inaccessible. We could, but we're not going to. No. He nodded slowly. All right, let's go find your geologist. We set out at 0800 hours, following the GPS coordinates northwest into the forest. The terrain was rough, the ground rising and falling through shallow valleys and over rocky outcrops. Snow covered everything, hiding roots and holes that could twist an ankle, or worse. We moved slowly, carefully, stopping every 30 minutes to check our position and catch our breath. Around noon, we found the first sign that we were getting close. A piece of orange fabric tied to a tree branch, faded by years of weather but still visible. It was a trail marker, the kind backcountry researchers use to mark their routes. I checked the case file. Halverson had noted using orange markers to tag his path to camp. We're close, I said. More markers appeared as we climbed higher, each one leading us deeper into the forest. The trees here were old and massive, their trunks wider than cars, their branches forming a canopy so dense that almost no light reached the ground. The snow was thinner here, unable to penetrate the overhead cover, and the ground was soft with centuries of needles. It was in this dim, cathedral-like space that we found the camp. Or what was left of it. The tent was still there, remarkably intact given 16 years of weather. It was collapsed on one side, but the orange fabric was unmistakable. Around it, Halverson's equipment lay scattered. A camp stove, a plastic bin that had once held food, a tarp weighed down by rocks. Everything was exactly where the troopers' photos showed it had been in 998. Nothing had been touched. This doesn't make sense, Briggs said. Animals should have torn through this years ago. He was right. Bears, wolves, even ravens should have scattered and destroyed everything. But the camp looked almost preserved, as if something had been keeping scavengers away. We approached carefully. I called out, though I knew no one would answer, and then unzipped the tent flap. The inside took my breath away. Halverson's sleeping bag was still rolled out, the fabric stained and moldy but intact. His field journal sat on top of a plastic case, exactly where the photos from 1998 showed it. But that's not what made me stop. The walls of the tent were covered in writing. Hundreds of words, maybe thousands, scrawled in black marker directly onto the orange fabric. They covered every surface, overlapping and spiraling, written in a hand that started neat, but devolved into manic scratching. I pulled out my phone and started photographing while Briggs stood guard outside. The words were fragments, repeated phrases. It watches, it knows my name, don't look at it, it looks like me, it looks like me, it looks like me. And again, not alone, never. Alone. It followed me here, it wants in. The final entries, near the tent opening, were almost illegible. It's pretending it sounds like help. Don't answer. Don't. I stepped back outside. He was losing his mind. Or he saw something that made him think he was, Briggs said. Check this out. He pointed to the ground near the tent entrance. There were boot prints in the hard-packed dirt, preserved by the shelter of the trees. They were Halverson's, based on the tread pattern. But they didn't lead away from camp. They circled it, round and round, dozens of overlapping tracks, as if he'd been pacing endlessly, wearing a path in the earth. And in the center of the circle, about 10 feet from the tent, was something else. A depression in the ground, about 6 feet long and 2 feet wide, like someone had been lying there. He wasn't alone, I said quietly. Briggs knelt next to the depression. This is old, years old, but look at this. He pointed to marks in the dirt at what would have been the head of the depression. Something was dragged from here northeast into the trees. I followed the faint trail with my eyes. It disappeared into the forest about 20 yards away, swallowed by shadows and undergrowth. That's where we'll find him, I said. We followed the trail, moving slowly, our weapons drawn. The forest seemed to press in around us, the trees closer together, the branches hanging lower. The trail was barely visible, just a disturbance in the needles and a few broken twigs, but it was enough. We found Halverson 30 yards into the trees, or what was left of him. The body was sprawled against the base of a massive spruce, partially covered by needles and decomposition. Most of the soft tissue was gone, taken by scavengers or decay, but the skeleton was intact, still wearing the tattered remains of outdoor clothing. His skull was turned away from us, facing deeper into the forest, but it was his hands that made me stop. His arm bones were extended forward, fingers splayed, as if he'd been reaching for something when he died. And clutched in the skeletal fingers of his right hand was his camera, the one that had been found in his mother's attic, except he was holding a different camera. "That's not right," Briggs said. "The camera was returned to his family." "No," I said slowly, my mind racing. A camera was returned to his family. His mother's camera, the one she kept in her attic. Then what's he holding? I knelt next to the body, careful not to disturb anything, and looked closer. The camera was different from the one we'd developed film from. This one was older, a Nikon, and the lens was aimed not at the ground but straight ahead, into the forest, as if Halverson had died taking one final photograph. I looked in the direction the camera was pointing and felt ice water dump into my stomach. About 15 feet away, partially hidden by trees, was a shape. It took my eyes a moment to resolve it. At first it looked like a tree trunk, pale and smooth, but then I realized it was too straight, too regular. It was standing upright, about 7 feet tall, and it had the rough outline of a human form. But the proportions were wrong. The torso too long, the limbs too thin, the head tilted at an angle that shouldn't be possible. And it was white, not skin white. The kind of white you see on deep-sea creatures that never see sunlight. "Briggs," I said quietly. "I see it." We stood very still. The shape didn't move. It just stood there among the trees, barely visible in the dim light, watching us. At least I think it was watching. It had no visible eyes, no features I could make out from this distance, but I felt its attention like a physical weight. Then Briggs raised his gun. "Don't," I said. But it was too late. The shot was deafening in the quiet forest. The bullet struck the shape dead center, and for a moment I thought it would go down. Instead, the shape tilted, almost curiously like a dog hearing a strange sound. Then it moved. Not walked, moved. It went from standing still to 10 feet closer in the space between heartbeats, so fast I didn't see the transition. One moment it was by the trees, the next it was near Halverson's body, towering over us. Now I could see its face, or where a face should have been. There was nothing there, just a smooth white surface, featureless and terrible. But I felt it looking at me, into me. "Run," I heard myself say. We ran. I don't remember the path back. I don't remember dodging trees or jumping over fallen logs. I just remember running, my breath burning in my lungs, my legs screaming, and behind us the sound of something moving through the forest. It didn't chase us like an animal would. It moved between the trees in ways that defied physics, appearing in my peripheral vision at impossible angles, always at the edge of sight but never quite catching up. And all the while I heard sounds that might have been wind through branches but sounded more like breathing. We burst out of the tree line into the clearing near Grafton Ridge just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. Behind us the forest had gone silent. No pursuit. No sounds. Just stillness. Harper was standing outside his cabin, the rifle in his hands. He looked at us, at our expressions, and nodded slowly. "You saw it." I couldn't speak. I bent over, hands on my knees, gasping. "It let you go," Harper continued. "Which means it wanted you to see it. Wanted you to know it's still there." "What is it?" Briggs managed. "Hell if I know. Been here long as the trees, probably longer. Most folks who see it don't come back. The ones that do," he gestured at the forest, "they stay inside at night. They don't answer when they hear voices, and they sure as hell don't go back." I straightened up, my legs still shaking. "Halverson, he's still up there. We need to recover the body." "No," Harper said flatly. "You don't. You do what I said, mark the location, let someone else deal with it. That thing claimed him 16 years ago. He's part of the forest now. I can't just leave him. You can, and you will. Because if you go back, you won't come out a second time. That thing let you go today. It won't be so generous twice." I looked at Briggs. His face was pale, his hands still shaking. I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. That shape in the forest, the impossible way it moved, the absence where its face should have been. Whatever we'd seen up there, it wasn't human. It might never have been human, and it was still watching. That night, from Harper's shed, I heard the voice again. My voice calling from the forest, asking to be let in, begging, screaming. I heard Briggs' voice too, and Harper's, and voices I didn't recognize. A woman crying, a child calling for help. None of it was real. In the morning, Tom's plane appeared right on schedule. We packed our gear in silence, said nothing to Harper except "thank you," and climbed aboard. As we lifted off, I looked down at Grafton Ridge, at the collapsed buildings, and the dark forest pressing in from all sides. Somewhere in those trees, Marcus Halverson's bones were slowly being absorbed by the earth. And somewhere, standing watch over him, was the thing he'd photographed before he died. The thing that was still there. Back in Anchorage, I should have filed my report and closed the case. I had enough evidence to classify Halverson's death as accidental, exposure and wildlife, end of story. No one at the Bureau would question it. No one except me. But I couldn't let it go. I spent 3 days in my office reviewing everything. The photographs from Halverson's camera, the measurements and positions we'd documented at the camp, the scrawled words on the tent walls, the shape we'd seen in the forest, if it had even been real. That was the question that gnawed at me. Had we really seen it? Briggs and I had been in an isolated location for days, minimal sleep, high stress. Mass hysteria wasn't unheard of in cases like this. 2 trained agents could convince themselves they'd seen something that wasn't there, except for the photographs. I pulled up the enhanced images from Quantico again, studying the 3 dark frames, the shape in the trees, the pale form moving closer, that hand pressed against the lens. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called in a favor. Dr. Patricia Monroe was a forensic anthropologist I'd worked with on a case in Juneau 2 years prior. She owed me nothing, but she was one of the few people I trusted to look at evidence without immediately dismissing it as impossible. "Wyatt," she said when she picked up, "please tell me this is about a nice, normal murder." "Afraid not. I need you to look at some photographs." "How disturbing are we talking?" "Scale of 1 to 10, maybe an 8. She sighed. "Send them over." I emailed her the enhanced images and waited. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Where did you get these?" Her voice was tight. "A camera recovered from a deceased geologist. Why?" "Wyatt, I need you to understand what I'm about to say. I've been doing this work for 17 years. I've examined remains from plane crashes, bear attacks, industrial accidents. I've seen what happens to human bodies under every conceivable circumstance. And And whatever is in these photographs, it's not any of those things. The proportions are wrong. The way it's standing is wrong. And that hand, she paused. The joints don't articulate properly. It's like someone built a human from memory, but got the details wrong. Could it be faked? Prosthetics, makeup, photo manipulation? The metadata says no. These were taken in 1998 on film stock that can't be easily manipulated. And even if someone tried, the proportions would still be off. Whatever was in front of that camera, it was there. My hands felt cold. What are you saying? I'm saying that I can't identify what species created those images. It's not human. It's not any known primate. It's not a bear standing upright or a moose or any animal I'm familiar with. Which leaves two options. Either this is the most sophisticated hoax in forensic history, or you've documented something that shouldn't exist. I thanked her and ended the call. My office suddenly felt very small. I pulled out the radio Harper had given me, Channel 12. I'd kept it charged, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe part of me knew I'd need to call him eventually. I pressed the transmit button. "Harper, this is Agent Wyatt, you there?" Static for a long moment, then, "I'm here. I need to ask you something. You said you've been in Grafton Ridge for 43 years. How long has that thing been there?" More static. When he spoke again, his voice was weary. "Long as anyone can remember. Maybe longer. The mining company that founded the town, they had records. Strange disappearances. Equipment that got moved overnight. Sounds in the forest. By the time they abandoned the mines, they'd lost 17 men. To what? They called it different names. The White Walker, the Watcher, the Pale Man. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's been here longer than us, and it'll be here long after we're gone. Have you seen it, up close?" A long pause. "Once. Winter of '94. I was trapping about 3 miles north of town. Found tracks in the snow. Looked almost human, but the stride was too long, and they went on for miles without stopping. I followed them to a clearing. That's where I saw it." "What happened?" "It was standing in the center of the clearing, perfectly still. When it noticed me, it tilted its head, just like you described. Then it took one step toward me. Just one. But that step covered 20 feet. I ran, and I haven't gone back to that clearing since." "Why didn't you report it?" "To who? The state troopers? The press? They'd say I was crazy, or drunk, or making it up for attention. Out here, you learn to keep quiet about the things you see. Otherwise, people stop believing anything you say." I understood that. One more question. The voices we heard that night. The ones pretending to be us. Does it do that often? Every night, far as I can tell. It mimics what it hears. Sometimes it's folks who lived here years ago. Sometimes it's people just passing through. I've heard my own voice calling from the woods more times than I can count. Why? Best I can figure? It's trying to lure people out. Trying to understand us, maybe. Or trying to become us. He paused. "If you're thinking about going back, don't. You got lucky once. That's more than most people get." "I'm not going back," I said. Though even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Over the next week, I tried to function normally. I wrote reports, attended briefings, worked on other cases. But every night, when I closed my eyes, I saw that shape in the forest, the way it moved, the absence where its face should have been. And I heard the voices. Not real ones. I wasn't that far gone. But in my mind, playing on loop. The sound of my own voice calling from outside Harper's shed, begging to be let in. The breathing in the darkness. The footsteps circling the building. Briggs noticed. He cornered me in the break room one afternoon, looking as haggard as I felt. "You're not sleeping," he said. "Neither are you," he laughed, but it was hollow. I keep thinking about what we saw, or what we think we saw. I've tried to rationalize it. Hallucination, misidentification, stress-induced delusion. But none of it fits. I know. I filed my report as exposure death, probable wildlife interference. Played it safe. What about you? Same. I hadn't, actually. My report was still sitting on my computer, unfinished. I couldn't bring myself to write what we'd really seen, but I also couldn't lie convincingly enough to satisfy myself. "Good," Riggs said. "Because if we put the truth in those reports, we'd both be in psych evaluation by the end of the week." He was right, of course. The Bureau didn't handle well with agents who claimed to see things that couldn't exist. Careers ended over less. But I kept thinking about Halverson, about the words he'd scrawled on his tent walls in the final days before he died. The descent from professional field notes to manic scribbling. He'd been a geologist, a scientist, someone trained to observe and document reality objectively. And reality had broken him. I pulled the case file again that night at home, spreading the documents across my kitchen table. The original trooper reports, the photographs, the enhanced images, and something I'd almost missed. A note in the evidence log, field samples, 47 specimens collected, stored at University of Washington geology depth. Halverson had collected rock samples, that's what he'd been doing up there. And those samples had been cataloged and stored before he disappeared. I called the university the next morning. Department of Geological Sciences. "This is FBI Special Agent Wyatt. I'm investigating a case involving one of your former researchers, Marcus Halverson." "Oh, yes. Someone called about him a few months ago. His mother's estate, I think." "That's right. I understand he collected field samples before his death. Are those still in your archives? Let me check. Typing sounds. Yes, we have them. 47 specimens cataloged and stored, though I should mention there's a note in the file." "What kind of note?" "It says the samples exhibited unusual properties upon initial examination. They were flagged for further study, but that never happened after Dr. Halverson disappeared. Would you like me to send you the preliminary analysis?" "Yes, immediately." The analysis arrived in my inbox 20 minutes later. I opened it, expecting geological jargon I wouldn't understand. What I got instead made my blood run cold. The report was written by a graduate student who'd been tasked with cataloging Halverson's samples in late October 1998, shortly after his disappearance. Most of it was standard. Rock type, mineral composition, estimated age. But near the end, the student had added an addendum. Upon closer examination of specimens 38 to 47, I observed anomalous properties that I cannot adequately explain. These samples, all collected from the same location, exhibit a crystalline structure that does not match any known mineral formation. More concerning, the samples appear to generate a low-level electromagnetic field, approximately 0.3 milligauss, with no apparent source. Most disturbing is the following observation. When kept in close proximity to living tissue, I inadvertently left specimen 42 in my pocket for several hours. Subjects report auditory hallucinations, including voices and whispers. Upon removal of the specimen, hallucinations cease within 15 to 20 minutes. I recommend these samples be quarantined and studied by specialists in electromagnetic phenomena. I further recommend that Dr. Halverson's field site be investigated for potential natural sources of this phenomenon. The report was signed and dated October 28, 1998. 3 days later, according to the university records, the graduate student had withdrawn from the program and left no forwarding address. I read the report 3 times, trying to process what it meant. The samples were generating electromagnetic fields. They were causing hallucinations. And they'd all come from the same location. Halverson's camp. Or more specifically, the area around his camp. The area where we'd seen the shape. I called Dr. Monroe back. I need your opinion on something. Hypothetically, could exposure to certain minerals or electromagnetic fields cause visual and auditory hallucinations? Absolutely. There's documented cases of people experiencing paranormal phenomena in locations with high EMF readings, power plants, caves with certain mineral deposits, even some old buildings with faulty wiring. The human brain is sensitive to electromagnetic interference. What kind of hallucinations? Varies. Visual distortions, shadow people, voices, feelings of being watched. The experiences tend to be consistent across individuals, which is why certain locations develop reputations for being haunted. Could it cause two people to hallucinate the same thing? If they're both exposed to the same field, and they've been primed with the same expectations, say, by reading reports or hearing stories, then yes. The brain would fill in the gaps with similar imagery. I felt a weight lift slightly. So, what we saw could have been a hallucination caused by electromagnetic interference. Could be. Were you near any power sources, underground cables, old equipment? I thought about the camp. The only equipment had been Halverson's gear, all of it long dead. No power sources, no cables, just rocks. Thanks, I said, and hung up. I should have felt relieved. The rational explanation was right there. Halverson had camped in an area with unusual mineral deposits. The electromagnetic fields they generated had caused hallucinations. He'd photographed these hallucinations, spiraled into paranoia, and ultimately wandered into the forest where he died of exposure. Briggs and I had experienced the same thing when we visited the site. The voices, the shape in the trees, all of it could be explained by EMF exposure. Except Halverson's body had been dragged from his camp. I'd seen the marks. Something physical had moved him 30 yards into the trees. Except the thing we'd seen had moved impossibly fast. Hallucinations don't leave tracks or displace air. Except Harper had been seeing and hearing things for 43 years. He couldn't have been constantly exposed to EMF that entire time. And except for one other detail that gnawed at me. If it was just hallucinations, why had the graduate student fled the university after examining the samples? What had she seen? I made a decision I knew I'd probably regret. I called Quantico and arranged to have Halverson's rock samples shipped to the Anchorage field office. If there was something unusual about them, I needed to know. They arrived 3 days later, packed in foam and sealed in plastic containers. 47 specimens, each labeled and cataloged. I took them to the Bureau's small forensics lab and started running basic tests. Composition analysis, electromagnetic readings, spectroscopy. The first 46 samples were normal. Granite, basalt, quartz, various sedimentary rocks consistent with the Grafton Ridge geological formation. Sample 47 was different. It was white, almost translucent, with a crystalline structure I didn't recognize. When I placed it under the microscope, I saw formations that looked organic, almost like bone structure, but not quite. And when I brought an EMF meter near it, the needle spiked. 0.3 milligauss. Exactly what the graduate student had reported. I picked up the sample, holding it in my palm. It was cold, colder than the ambient temperature could account for. And as I held it, I started to hear something. Whispering, faint at first, like wind through distant trees, but gradually growing louder, more distinct. Words I couldn't quite make out, spoken in voices I almost recognized. I set the sample down. The whispering stopped. I picked it up again. The whispering returned, clearer this time. And now I could make out what it was saying. "Come back, we're waiting. Come back to the ridge." I dropped the sample like it was burning. It hit the table and rolled, coming to rest under the lamp. In the bright light, I could see something I'd missed before. Thin lines running through the crystal like veins, and they were moving, pulsing like a heartbeat. I backed away from the table, my own heart hammering. The sample sat there under the light, perfectly still. But those vein-like